10 years ago, I needed a reason. Today, I don't need anything. The body wakes up ready. 56 years old. I'm not talking about memory, not about how things were before everything changed. I'm talking about now, about what happens when I wake up in the morning, before the day has started, before coffee, before a single thought has formed. There is a response that a few years ago had disappeared completely, and that came back in a way I can only describe with one word: whole. I didn't get here with a doctor's help, not with a prescription. I got here because at some point I stopped accepting that this part of my life was finished, and I started paying attention to things nobody had ever told me to pay attention to. If you're here, something in you recognizes what I'm saying. That distance that grew between who you were and how your body responds today. I know what that feels like. I lived inside that for longer than I should have. Stay until the end. What actually moved the needle for me comes later in this video, and it's not what any doctor ever suggested. I worked the land for most of my adult life, small property, up before the sun, physical work from morning to late afternoon. I was never the kind of man who talked about his body. You worked it, you rested it, you got up and did it again. That was the whole conversation. So when things started changing, I did what men like me do. I said nothing, not to anyone. It started gradually enough that I could explain it away. Tired from a long week, stress from a difficult season, one of those things. But there came a morning, I remember it clearly because of how ordinary everything else about that day was, when I woke up and there was nothing, no response, not reduced, not slower than before, nothing. Like a switch that had been turned off sometime in the night and nobody had told me where the switch was. I lay there for a while, staring at the ceiling of a room I had slept in for years. My wife was still asleep beside me, and I felt something that I think a lot of men feel in that moment, but almost none of them name out loud. I felt like I was disappearing. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone around me would notice, but something that had always been part of how I understood myself as a man, a quiet, constant thing I had taken completely for granted, was gone. And I did not know if it was coming back. The weeks that followed were a particular kind of quiet. I went about everything normally. Ate, worked, talked, laughed when something was funny. But there was a part of me that had gone into a kind of holding pattern. I stopped initiating. Told myself we were both tired. Found reasons. My wife is not a woman who pushes, she never has been. But I could feel her noticing in the way that people who know you well notice things without saying them. Eventually, I went to see a doctor. I sat down, explained what was happening as plainly as I could, which, for a man like me, is still not very plain, and waited for something useful. He ran blood work. Everything came back within range. He used the word normal 3 times in the same sentence. Normal for your age, normal for this stage of life, normal to experience some changes. Then he mentioned a medication, said it was widely used, safe, effective, and looked at me with the expression of someone who has just handed you the solution and is waiting for you to accept it. I left with a piece of paper I never filled, not because I'm stubborn about medicine in general, because something in me could not reconcile the idea of needing a pill on a schedule to be present with my own wife. It felt like being handed a crutch and told to call it walking. I know some men make peace with that. I couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not without trying everything else first. So I went home and I kept quiet and I carried it. I have a brother, older than me by 7 years. We don't see each other often. He lives a good distance away. But when we do talk, we talk the way men talk, when there's enough history between them that pretending is too much effort. He called one evening out of nowhere, the way he sometimes does, and we were going back and forth about nothing important when something in me just gave way. I told him, not everything, not in any kind of detail, just enough. I said the body wasn't cooperating and the doctor had nothing real to offer and I didn't know what the next move was. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I went through something similar about 2 years ago. That surprised me. He had never mentioned it. Neither had I, to anyone, until that moment. He told me what he'd figured out, not as someone giving advice, just as someone comparing notes. He said the problem, at least for him, hadn't been one thing. It had been the vessels, the small ones, the ones nobody talks about because they don't show up on standard blood work, and they don't cause obvious symptoms, and doctors don't have a clean intervention for them. He said that as men get older, chronic inflammation, the quiet, invisible kind, slowly affects the walls of the smaller blood vessels. And those vessels are exactly the ones that determine whether that response happens or doesn't happen, fully or partially, reliably or not. He'd been skeptical of everything at first, more than skeptical. He told me he had sat with the idea that if a man needs something from a bottle to function like a man, then maybe he just wasn't that man anymore. He said it with the kind of dry honesty that only an older brother can deliver. But eventually something he'd read, and then something a friend had confirmed, pushed him past that position. He tried a combination of natural ingredients, things he took every morning, not on an as-needed basis, just as part of the day. And after some weeks, he said, things shifted. I asked him what specifically. He mentioned two things. One was an antioxidant. He described it as something that works directly on blood vessel walls, reducing the inflammation that builds up in the smaller vessels over years. Not the heart, not circulation in the big sense. The small passages, the ones that need to be open and elastic for everything to work the way it's supposed to. The other thing he mentioned was a plant called fenugreek, something he described as blocking a conversion the body makes past a certain age that wastes testosterone by turning it into something else. He said he didn't understand all of it. He just knew what changed. I want to be honest about my reaction. It was cold, not hostile, just flat. I was not someone who believed in supplements. I had a specific kind of contempt for that entire category. The idea that something in a capsule could do what years of physical work and decent food and a regular life had failed to protect. If my body was breaking down, I did not think a plant extract was going to be the answer. That felt like the kind of thing men tell themselves when they're not ready to accept that nothing is going to work. But my brother is not a man who exaggerates. Never has been. And there was something in the way he said it. Matter of fact, no sales pitch. The same way he'd tell me what seed variety worked better in a dry season, that I couldn't dismiss as easily as I wanted to. I didn't do anything with it for a few weeks. Then I did. What I noticed didn't arrive like a switch being flipped. It was slower than that, and quieter. Around the 5th or 6th week, something had changed in the quality of what was happening. Not just whether it was happening, but how. The firmness, the consistency, the sense that the body was doing what it was supposed to do, without strain, without hesitation, without me holding my breath and hoping. I wasn't moved by it at first. Mostly I was irritated with myself for having waited so long. The link for what I found is in the description if you want to look into it. No pressure. But that was only part of what changed. The rest of it, the daily habits that built the foundation underneath everything, that's what I want to walk through now. The first thing I learned, not from a book, but from paying attention to my own body after years of ignoring it, was about what actually controls blood flow at the level that matters. Think of it this way. Imagine a property with an old irrigation system. The main pump works fine. The reservoir is full. But the lines running out to the far edges of the land, those narrow pipes, have been slowly calcifying for years. The pressure at the source is normal, but the water barely reaches the ends of the field. A standard check of the pump tells you nothing is wrong. The problem is in the small lines. That is almost exactly what happens with circulation and male sexual function past 50. The large vessels, heart, main arteries, may be perfectly healthy. Standard blood work shows nothing unusual. But the small peripheral vessels, the ones that fill erectile tissue, have been accumulating inflammation for years, slowly, invisibly, until one day the pressure doesn't reach where it needs to go. Researchers at the Boston University School of Medicine documented this more than 2 decades ago. The direct link between endothelial health, which is the condition of the inner walls of blood vessels, and erectile function. What they found was that in a significant portion of cases, the underlying problem wasn't cardiac. It was the small vessels, the lining, the elasticity that had been quietly degrading. The most common mistake men make is assuming that if their heart is fine, their circulation is fine. It isn't the same thing. Not for these purposes. What I started doing, every morning before anything else, a large glass of warm water with a full tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil. I know how that sounds. But the compounds in high-quality olive oil, polyphenols, have documented anti-inflammatory action specifically on vascular endothelium. A study published in the European Journal of Nutrition found measurable reductions in vascular inflammation markers in men who incorporated quality olive oil into their morning routine over 8 weeks. Not cooked, not mixed into food, cold, raw, alone, in the morning, before eating. The mistake people make: they use standard cooking oil, they heat it, they treat it as a condiment. Heat destroys the polyphenols. It has to be extra virgin, cold, and taken on its own. 1 tablespoon, every morning, before coffee, before anything. The second thing, and this one surprised me more than anything else, was what was happening at night while I slept. Or rather, what wasn't happening. I used to sleep what I thought was enough. 6, sometimes 7 hours. I'd wake up and feel like I'd been dragged through something rather than rested. For a while I blamed age. Then I started learning about what the body is actually supposed to be doing between midnight and 4 in the morning. Specifically what it produces during deep sleep, and what gets blocked when that sleep is fragmented or too shallow. The body produces the majority of its daily testosterone during deep sleep, not steadily throughout the day, in pulses at night, during specific sleep phases. When a man sleeps poorly, too light, too interrupted, too short in the deep phases, he wakes up with meaningfully lower testosterone levels than he would have had otherwise. Not slightly lower. Research from the University of Chicago found that men who slept 5 hours a night for 1 week had testosterone levels equivalent to someone 10 to 15 years older. 1 week, 5 hours. The mechanism is simple once you know it. Deep sleep triggers the release of growth hormone, which in turn signals the body to produce testosterone. Cut the deep sleep, cut the signal. Cut the signal, cut the production. This is not a minor variable. This is one of the central levers. The mistake men make: they treat sleep as the time left over after everything else. They stay up too late with a screen in their face, drink something to relax, wake up multiple times, and consider 7 hours in bed to be 7 hours of sleep. It isn't. What I changed: I stopped eating within 2.5 hours of sleeping. I dropped the room temperature. I stopped looking at screens for the last hour of the night. And I added a specific ritual: 15 minutes of slow, deliberate breathing before lying down. Not meditation in the formal sense. Just breathing slowly, 4 counts in, 6 counts out, until the body's emergency system started stepping down. The difference in how I woke up was measurable within the first 2 weeks. The third thing was the one I resisted longest, because it didn't look like a health practice. It looked like doing less. I had spent my whole life equating effort with result. Work harder, get more, push through, finish the job. That was the entire operating system. What I did not understand was that the body, particularly the hormonal systems in a man past 50, reads sustained high effort and high stress as a signal to shut down non-essential functions. And reproduction, from the body's point of view, is a non-essential function when survival is under threat. Chronic stress keeps cortisol elevated. Elevated cortisol directly suppresses testosterone production. This is not a theory. It is one of the most replicated findings in endocrinology. The body cannot run the stress response and the reproductive response simultaneously for extended periods. It chooses, and past a certain point, it chooses the stress response by default. What I started doing was what I can only call a deliberate gap. Every afternoon at the same time, I stopped. Not for long, 30, 40 minutes. I sat somewhere quiet. No task, no phone, no planning the next thing. Just stopping. I felt useless doing it at first. It went against everything I'd built my sense of self around. But within about 3 weeks, I began to notice something. The evenings were different. A quietness in the body that wasn't fatigue. A presence that I hadn't felt in a long time. It didn't happen because I relaxed. It happened because I gave the hormonal system room to do what it was trying to do, instead of drowning it in cortisol every hour of every day. These aren't complicated things, but they have to be done consistently, not when you feel like it. Every day, as part of how you live. I'm 66 years old now. I live on a small property. I wake up early because I want to, not because something is chasing me. I work with my hands in the morning. I rest in the afternoon on purpose. I sleep in a dark, cool room, and I wake up the way I used to wake up when I was a different kind of younger. Not rested in the passive sense, but ready. The thesis of everything I've shared in this video is this. The body doesn't stop working because of age. It stops working because of accumulation. Inflammation that was never addressed, sleep that was never protected, stress that was never interrupted, and small vessels that were quietly narrowing for years without a single warning sign. Address the accumulation, and the body has more capacity than most men over 50 have been told to expect. I want to ask you something. Leave it in the comments. Be as specific as you want, or as brief as you want. When you wake up tomorrow morning, before you check anything, before the day pulls you into it, what does your body feel like? Not what you think it should feel like. What it actually feels like right now, at the age you are today. I'm asking because the answer to that question tells you more than any blood work result. And most men have stopped asking it. The window for addressing what I've described in this video is real, and it narrows. Not because age is a cliff, it isn't. But because the tissue involved responds differently depending on how long the inflammation has been building. The vessels that are still elastic respond. The ones that have hardened over years of unaddressed damage respond much less. This isn't meant to frighten you. It's something I learned the hard way. There is a point past which the road back is longer than it needed to be. I was close to that point when I finally stopped waiting. What more time without acting actually looks like isn't dramatic. It's quiet. It's more mornings waking up with that flat, absent feeling and telling yourself it's just how things are now. It's more distance between you and the person next to you that neither of you mentions out loud. It's the slow arithmetic of a man becoming a smaller version of himself without ever having made the decision to. What I shared in this video and what I found in the description work together. Neither one replaces the other. The habits build the foundation. What's in the description supports what the habits are trying to accomplish. The link is in the description and pinned in the comments. Go there, read through it, make your own call. No countdown, no pressure, no version of this that requires you to decide right now. The men I've seen turn this around, and I've spoken with more of them than you'd expect, didn't have better genetics, or more time, or an easier situation. They just stopped treating the decision as something to get to eventually. Eventually has a cost. Most of them would tell you the only thing they genuinely regret is the time they spent waiting to find out whether something would work.